I want to welcome Todd Money, a veteran strategic coach who served financial advisors and business owners in the financial industry for the past 12 years. Todd coached my former CEO for almost 10 years, helping him grow to be one of the top producing independent advisory firms in Voya Financial Advisors, formerly ING Financial Partners. He also coached our leadership team for several years, where I had the opportunity to be coached directly by Todd. I can say he is a consummate professional and masterful at helping business leaders get clear about what they want, develop a plan to get there, and work more synergistically together to achieve measurable results. In my formal role as Chief Operations Officer, I was to be the catalyst to execute once Todd, the CEO, and I had settled on a plan. I found him tremendously helpful, encouraging, and an unbiased resource during my time with the company. On behalf of the Master's Program at Clemson University, I want to thank you, Todd, for allowing us to interview you as a way of learning what it takes to be a successful business coach and consultant for today's entrepreneurs.
Hey, Lori, it's my pleasure. I thank you for the opportunity as well, and humbled by your comments. That's awesome. I'm glad I was such an influence there, and it was a great opportunity to work with you.
Well, I'm glad I had this opportunity to interview you because it truly is an honor. So let's go ahead and get started.
Sure.
Why did you choose independent business coaching consultancy?
Well, I think I would rather say that it chose me, quite frankly, Lori. I spent the first 12 years of my career in the corporate world working for Fortune 500 companies, Pitney Bowes, Konica Business Machines, and automatic data processing. I had a great sales career, was trained by some of the best trainers and company training content out there, and frankly had a very lucrative and successful career. But I've often said that I had more money than common sense at the time, and I ended up buying a small graphics business basically to help my brother-in-law and my sister get off the ground and develop a career path. And unfortunately, it didn't work out so well. So when the Y2K thing turned into a non-event, I had to jump into the business to save my investment. Ended up doing a complete turnaround strategy. Long story short, after about 2 years and really growing that business, a key employee of the company, the former owner's son, ended up sabotaging my business. And shortly after that, within about a month after that, was 9/11. And between the two, my sales plummeted. My business went sideways. And I had to set up a new shop in a different area of town. Did that. And during that time, when I was divesting all my equipment and really restructuring the business to survive, my brother-in-law, who was also my best friend, ended up taking a good number of the remaining few clients that we had to a competitor because he couldn't hang in there with me. So at the time, I was really reeling. I had left a six-figure income, a corporate career that was on a great trajectory. For this situation to come about, just zapped my enthusiasm for business and just really took the wind out of my sails. And that's when I discovered a coach. I was one day driving up to the office to finish selling off the last of my equipment, and while I was driving up there, I heard a couple ladies, business coaches, on a TV show, or radio show rather, and became intrigued. And I thought, now that sounds interesting, and quite frankly, I could use somebody like that. And just that space of being, quote, lonely at the top was just it's hard to describe, and only business owners can really appreciate that feeling. And of course, shortly after that, I found a business coach. This individual helped me to recover my mojo, really get back on track, work on the fundamentals of a business plan and those type of things, and really rediscover the vision that I had for not only my career and business, but for my life. And in so doing, I just completely rebounded, and that's when, I think coaching found me. I just have a heart for people. I love business and strategy. And I thought, this is a career I really need to pursue. So that really launched me into that world of coaching, where I discovered what it was about and started down that path.
Well, that's a great story. It's true. It's truly an example of God never closes one door without opening another.
You bet. That's exactly right. And of
So
course,
you
that was a
touched
prayer
on
all along. Go ahead.
You touched on this before, but I would like to learn more about your professional background. Before you entered coaching and consulting and the consulting industry, you said you worked for Fortune 500 companies. What was your sweet spot? Where did you focus most of your energy in those corporate settings?
Well, excuse me. One of the things that I discovered uh, in my major in college was that I had a real knack for business. One of my favorite classes was business policy, and that's, of course, if you remember, a course where you would, research and diagnose companies and put together strategies based on, the challenges that they were having and the opportunities and threats that they were facing, and to really set up a game plan that allowed them to be successful. And I just excelled in that, and quite frankly, I knew that had to be a part of my my career. The other thing I realized was I was a resident advisor in college, and I absolutely loved the opportunity to help young folks in college avoid a lot of the mistakes that I had made along the way, and to skip some steps, not to have to go through it, but actually to take themselves up several levels by just learning by example and from example. So, going into the corporate world, I knew those things about myself, and my dad was in sales all his career, and I knew that was a great field to be in, and I felt like I had that gift as well of being persuasive and influential. So I chose the sales field, and fortunately had these opportunities to work in these environments. Now, my first stint with Pitney Bowes was selling copiers and mailing equipment and facsimile equipment to mom and pop businesses. That was true cold calling. I guess you could say I cut my teeth in sales that way, and priceless experience. Anybody that's in sales can tell you if you can do that, you can do just about any kind of sales, and that's, I would agree, probably true. But what I realized, Lori, was that there wasn't enough relationship in that sales process for me. It was knocking on doors. It was making quick sales, single machine type of applications. And I was good at it, but it just didn't fulfill me. And so I graduated, if you will, to more of a national accounts position when I moved over to Konica Business Machines. Now, that's where I really began to flourish, because that's much more strategic in its nature. In fact, I was certified in strategic selling, Miller and Hyman strategic selling, which is understanding the dynamics of a complex sell, where there are multiple buying influences, and developing strategies based on each influencer's personality. What is their buying criterion? Understanding how to marry up the right information, the right approach with that particular personality and buying influence in order to move the sale along. It was also an opportunity for me to develop team selling skills, where you have to leverage other people within your team to marry up with those personalities, those buying influences, to advance the sale. So I love that stuff because it was strategic in nature. You had to do what's called blue sheeting and sit down and figure out what are the personal wins for each of these buying influences, and figure out a strategy that would help each person to feel better and move forward in and around the solution that you felt like would be right for them. And so that's really where I got into my wheelhouse, and understood that this strategic type of approach to business was definitely where I was called to be. And that was further evidenced in my successful track with, albeit a short track, with automatic data processing, where I was also in national account sales, selling to Fortune 500 companies, complex sales, but selling intangibles for the first time. That was a challenge that I wanted to give myself, was to say, if you've been successful selling products and services, how about going into completely intangible outsourced solutions for payroll and HR? So that's what took me down the path, I think, and positioned me well for a consultancy coaching kind of role that I have now.
Well, thank you for sharing. My next question is, do you consider coaching and consulting as the rebirth of your career, perhaps after a partial retirement, or do you consider it as a step up from your former responsibilities? and if you'll expand and maybe explain your thoughts on this when you answer.
Yeah, sure. I would definitely call it more of a rebirth. It was, although there were a lot of similarities from the standpoint of using basic fundamental skills of influence and persuasion, using people skills to be able to create trust and rapport very quickly, which is essential in a coaching consultancy type of role, being able to really understand the lay of the land within a corporate environment and to be able to figure out, what direction a business wants to go. And particularly as it relates to the leadership of that company, that's a critical piece of the puzzle, is to figure out, how is the company positioned to be able to grow and expand, and what's the mindset and the capabilities of leadership to be able to move the company in that direction. So, from that standpoint, it's very similar, but it was completely different. Selling myself, for one thing, was very different than selling a service or a company or a product that I represented. And so that was a complete adjustment, a complete change in the type of sell that I was used to. And it was quite different from the standpoint of being in a position of working with those to help them build their business, as opposed to actually selling something that was going to be a part of their business, like payroll services or, copying equipment or that type of thing. So for sure it was a rebirth. Completely different, but yet still leveraging a lot of the skills that I had. And it was very liberating too, quite frankly. When I think about rebirth, I think about, a new world, a new life, so to speak. And that's exactly what it was for me. It just opened up a whole new world of opportunity and possibility. And quite frankly, as I look back on it, as much as I enjoyed the sales and corporate environment and the security and all that kind of stuff, I wouldn't trade my current role as a coach consultant for anything. It's just, it's where I'm meant to be.
Thank you, Todd. When you chose this field, and I think it's become very apparent to us by now that your wheelhouse and your talent is definitely on the visionary and strategic side. But what made you choose the strategic coach consultancy route versus a more specialized niche, such as finance, or given your background in sales, you could have even done a niche service from just sales growth consulting?
Yeah, that's a great point, Lori. Quite frankly, from a marketing and sales perspective, there's a lot of legitimate reasons why I could, and many would say should, have chosen more of a niche approach to my business model. However, I don't know that I would be as completely fulfilled and satisfied just focusing in on one narrow niche of offering to the market. The challenge is that, in a niche situation, you're really isolated and focused on one particular subject matter. For instance, finance, or it could be, as you pointed out, certainly with the extensive training that I have had in sales, I could absolutely focus on that as a niche, selling within the financial services industry. And I leverage those skills and leverage that knowledge with my clients for sure. But I just find it, I don't know, perhaps the word is boring, just to focus on one particular topic. I feel like that's using like one fraction of my brain power, if you will, where my collective experience in the past, my gifts, are more around sitting beside a CEO, a president, or an owner of a company and looking at the business as a whole and really learning about the individual as a leader and what's their vision and pulling that out of them, because a lot of times they don't know what that vision is. But I love that part of the process, to really think big picture. What are the possibilities for you? I mean, I find that business owners a lot of times are operating in a box. They have tunnel vision. They've been so close to their business, they're not able to step back and really see the bigger picture and to see the forest for all the trees that are in their face. And I just love that role, to be able to help a business owner step back from it all and really see the possibilities of what they have right there under their nose, and to and to flesh that out in a way that it becomes real, a real possibility, because it's one thing to think about a pipe dream. It's another thing to really see that that is a possibility. And by putting some structure and some organization in place, they can achieve that vision, and they can live a much more exciting and fulfilling experience in their work and in their lives. So, it's just a whole different experience for me working at that level with a CEO or an owner than it is to, say, just come alongside a salesperson or come alongside a CFO or an individual within the company and work on a very narrow niche. Now, with that said, I will say, Lori, that I do have offerings, if you will, that are somewhat niche-oriented. Like I do have a sales group coaching program. I also have, some programs that are focused on, narrow aspects of practice management within the financial advisory system. And, those are helpful, but I use those more as marketing tools because a lot of folks don't necessarily know me well enough or trust me well enough initially to put me in that privileged position of come alongside them as owners and high-level executives within their firms and work at that strategic level. So they want to kind of test the waters first. So that's a way for me to say, look, let me help you accelerate in this particular area, but then what I really want the opportunity to do is come alongside you and pull it back and see the bigger picture and how we can really accomplish a lot more than that. Does that make sense?
It does, and I appreciate you sharing that because I like your perspective of that niche offering as a way to just get the opportunity to build the relationship with the client.
Mm-hmm. Well put.
I think you've answered this, but I want to ask it just to see if you want to expand on it a little more. What do you find most fulfilling about your independent coaching and consulting role?
Gosh, where to begin with that? I guess if I really had to isolate it to some degree, it would be really feeling like I have made a difference, a significant difference, not only in the business, but really more importantly in the lives of the owner and the key leaders within the business, whereby my input, my influence, my perspective has allowed them to achieve more than perhaps they even thought they could achieve. But even if they thought they could achieve, my influence or my involvement helped them to achieve it quicker. And to be able to see that enthusiasm, that excitement, that motivation and energy that comes from these business owners and leaders is just so fulfilling to me. I mean, that really is the juice for me, is to be able to hear one of my clients say, this is so cool. Wow, look at what we're able to do, or look what we've done in the past year. We've gone from this to this, and that's exciting. And to really go beyond that and see that not only has it impacted their professional lives, but to see how it's actually influenced their lives at home with their families, to be able to spend actually more time with their families, with their friends, doing things that they love to do instead of being handcuffed to the business. I mean, I know that feeling. I was there. I was working till 2 a.m. in the morning in my businesses and just felt handcuffed to my desk. And it's a bad feeling, and you lose precious time with your family, with your children. I mean, I have 3 young kids, Lori, you know that, and I feel like there were a couple years there that were just a total blur. I felt like I was reacting to everything in my business, and to be able to help other business owners get ahead of that game and to actually be much more in control of their business means that they're much more in control of their lives, and they don't lose that precious time. And moreover, I'll tell you one more thing real quickly. What really adds a lot of icing to that cake for me is the fact that, particularly in the financial space, Lori, financial advisors, as you well know, are touching many lives in profound ways. And that, to me, has such an intrinsic element to it. The pay it forward kind of thing. It's like, when I make a difference in a financial advisor's life and in their business, that means that they're touching more people's lives, and they're making a bigger difference in the world. So the little bit of energy, the Kaizen effect, right, the butterfly effect, the little bit of effort that I put into a coaching relationship with a client has kind of a rippling effect in the world. It's touching a lot of people. And I don't know, I guess that's the faith side of me to feel like God is using me in that type of profound way.
Well, it's obvious that you love what you do, and you hit on a key point in your dialogue, and that is that the time with your family is the one thing you can't get more of. You can't make more time than we're given. And when your children are little and you miss those first opportunities, you'll never get those again.
Amen.
What do you find most challenging?
I would have to say probably the most challenging thing is when an individual I'm working with has a good feeling or a good sense of what they want, or at least what they think they want, and they're trying to make progress, but for any number of reasons, they're not. They're not following through on their commitments. They're not getting done what they know they need to get done. Now, there's no judgment in that. Let me be clear about that. I mean, that's something that as a professional coach, a certified professional coach, I've been well trained in, is not having judgment around those things. I certainly don't shun or look poorly at an advisor or a business owner that's not following through on commitments and things of that nature. It's just an opportunity, right, to explore why that's happening. Are they not committed enough to the vision, right, or are they lacking the skills? Is there fear that's getting in the way? Now, all that stuff is good. But it's really when they're not necessarily committed to what they say they want that's the biggest challenge. I mean, that's the number one thing that I have to be mindful of in a coaching relationship and bring it right up to the surface is what's your level of commitment, and to help them really discover that commitment. And sometimes they just don't have it, and that can be a real challenge. They say they want to achieve something, but yet they're not quite committed enough. And it's not necessarily a negative challenge, it's just a challenge. I enjoy that challenge sometimes. Other times it's just not necessarily a good fit, or it might not be good timing for the coaching relationship, and that's okay too.
How do you personally overcome your frustrations when the challenges are not easily combated?
Well, a lot of it has to be in direct feedback with the client, and frankly, it's really about setting up the right client relationships to begin with. A lot of times I'm a relator. I work hard at just making new connections with folks in the industry, in the financial industry. A lot of times, unfortunately, they're tainted with this perception that I, like so many others, are just after the relationship for the sake of the sale. But that's quite frankly not true. The only way I know whether it's a good fit to be in some type of formal coaching relationship is to have a relationship with the individual, to get to know them and them to get to know me. And even if it doesn't lead to a coaching relationship, a formal coaching relationship, I still appreciate and value the relationship in general. I enjoy the friendships. I enjoy the connections. I believe in a pay-it-forward type of mindset, and wherever I can, I try to generate value. But all that to say that I'm very intentional on the front end to develop the right kind of relationships and the right kind of coaching engagements to begin with, where expectations are set up front. I make sure that it's the right timing, that they have the right motives for the coaching relationship, that we pretty quickly in the process discover a sense of vision and clarity about what they want to accomplish for themselves and why. The big WHY behind it, because that's where the commitment comes in. How bad do they want that? And when you set that up in the right way, a lot of times the challenges that we're talking about are not negative challenges, they're positive challenges. They're more like opportunities than they are obstacles that frustrate you, that are just unsurmountable. But occasionally you do run into those situations, Lori, where, despite your best effort and best intentions on both sides, for a number of reasons, it just doesn't work out so well. Maybe they thought they wanted something really badly, but once we began to pursue it, they realized, gosh, this isn't what I really want. Quite frankly, I want to stay right where I am. I want to continue just the way I am. And that's okay. No judgment, right? But that's a challenge where the answer is not necessarily to overcome the challenge, is to celebrate that clarity and to realize that maybe that season in the coaching relationship is past, and it's time to move forward in another way.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing. Specifically, what topics related to business do you coach and consult?
Yeah, a lot of topics. There are certain topics that, I might not go into a deep dive around. There are certain aspects of practice management, for instance, within a financial advisory firm that would be better left to maybe professionals within the broker-dealer organization that they're a part of. Quite frankly, they have a ton of resources in terms of asset management, specific allocation strategies and things of that nature. I don't get into that level of detail, but what I do focus on, and quite frankly, I guess you could say somewhat specialize in with regards to that larger strategic approach to the coaching relationship, is in creating a vision beyond where the advisor and the business is today, and helping them to see beyond that wall, that they've created for themselves, that sense of identity that they may have created for themselves that might not be the fulfillment of their potential. Maybe there's a lot more there than they realize that they have, and I love that opportunity to be able to come in and really assess the individuals, to assess the business, and to be able to paint a picture of possibility around where they really could be, and to energize them around that possibility, and to develop, this is where I really excel, is in helping them develop a game plan or a strategy that turns into literally a plan that has a process to it. You have to be able to map out, the roads that you're going to drive on, the places that you're going to stay, the milestones that you're going to cover. And along the way, by the way, you need to be able to stop and smell the roses and appreciate where you are and enjoy that experience. And that's what I love with regards to that larger strategic approach, is to be able to lay that out, or help an advisor or a business owner lay that out, and then to be able to execute on that. And a lot of times that means really developing alignment with their team. If they have a team, you can't do it alone. You have to leverage your team. So to be able to flesh out that plan and to be able to cascade that vision and that plan to the team, so that everybody's bought into it, everybody's aligned, and they begin to develop their own goals within their roles and areas of responsibility that align with the bigger vision and the bigger goals for the company, and to be able to execute on that with what I call a cadence of accountability. And accountability isn't a four-letter word. It's a really positive thing when you think about it the right way. It's the ability to account for what you're doing. That's all it is being able to tell somebody essentially what you're doing to move forward in the ways that the company has decided it wants to move forward, and to create some rhythm and synergy in that regard. So, that really is, I guess you could say, from a broader strategic perspective, that's a big part of what I deliver or help deliver. And the rest of it is really, getting into some of the details. I work a lot with advisors on segmentation strategies, defining their ideal client. That's huge, because it really liberates the firm to accelerate growth when they understand who they're best suited to serve and how to actually serve that group of clientele to the best of their ability. So also developing service level strategies that meet the needs of their ideal target market or target audience. And then to put together marketing strategies that attract those type of people, rather than them having to push so hard to go find those people and to sell them. The beauty is that you can create such an attractive model that it's much easier to bring in the right types of clients. And I love that particular aspect of deliverable as well. And that leverages a lot of my sales skills in the past as well as my strategic skills.
Thank you, Todd.
Mm-hmm.
Some researchers have gathered data that may suggest the strategic coaching consultant role prepares you to return to the corporate environment as a CEO. Do you agree or disagree, and why or why not?
I definitely agree. There's no doubt about it. There are a lot of strategic coach consultancies out there that are well positioned to be able to run a business. In fact, I would say, gosh, I don't know how many hours it's added up to now, but last count it was well over 2,500 hours of direct coaching that I've had with business owners and hundreds of different firms of all shapes and sizes. So, naturally I've been involved in high-level strategic conversations, mergers, acquisitions, layoffs, as well as major hiring decisions. I've been involved in just about every aspect of running a business. So there's no doubt this experience that I've had in this role has positioned me well for that type of role as a CEO or running a company. But that's a decision, that's a career decision that every coach consultant would have to make for themselves. Did they get into business as a coach to ultimately prepare themselves to run a large company? I would say most of us do not go into this field for that reason. We go into it for all the intrinsic reasons that I outlined earlier. And I'm not sure that you can get that same level of fulfillment as a CEO of a large company, say selling widgets, or even a financial advisory firm. All those are opportunities and possibilities for me, but it's not selling and delivering the thing that I'm most passionate about, which is the stuff that I do with advisors. And more importantly, it's the results that they get that I'm actually selling and delivering. And that is priceless to me. So, yes, it definitely does prepare one to be in that type of role. It could certainly open up a world of opportunities to pursue those kind of positions. But for me, I don't see myself. I could certainly see myself continuing to be the CEO of my own coaching consultancy firm and to continue to scale this business to the point where as long as I can continue to deliver with excellence and make a huge impact on people's lives. But I don't think that that's a position that I would want to pursue for a different company or a different industry or career path.
So I guess it's safe to assume that if you were to be afforded that opportunity, you would most likely bypass that role.
Probably. I would have to look at it. It would have to be a unique opportunity, and it would probably need to be somehow in the same type of work that I'm currently doing.
Okay. What tactics have you found most successful when your client objects to the proposed suggestions in order to move him or her toward their stated desired state?
That's a really good question, Lori. First, you use the term suggestion, and I want to bring some light to that word in particular. That is more of a consultative word than it is a coaching word. In the coaching world, in its purest sense, we are not supposed to be providing suggestions, if you will, or giving advice. So that's really where in the coaching consultancy title, I lean towards the consultative side, where I might provide a suggestion. I might offer some anecdotal ideas or provide some recommendations, right? In that case, though, it always comes back to empowering my client with choice. They have to ultimately decide what they want to do. My suggestions or ideas are only, one of many that they may come up with. And with my coaching hat on, I want to use, a tool we call power questioning in order to help them come up with their own solutions as well. And then once we've kind of inventoried a number of ideas for getting from point A to point B, ultimately I'll ask that person or that client to make a commitment, right, to make a choice, to decide on what path they want, and to help them understand the why behind it so that they have that level of commitment they need to get through, to make the decision and implement and execute, right? So if they're not achieving the results they want, or they're not taking appropriate action, right, with that context of giving them choices and empowering them with the opportunity to own their own choice rather than, own a choice that I made for them, which is not what I want to have happen, then we're in a good position to accomplish whatever needs to be accomplished. But again, if that's not following through, if they're not doing what's necessary, then I dig deeper into the toolbox. And as a certified coach, and this is where, official and legitimate certification and training, extensive training is important, is we, as trained coaches, have a number of tools in our toolbox that we can leverage. I mentioned power questions. That's a specific strategy and approach to asking questions that dig deeper, right? That get to the source of what's blocking someone from getting that breakthrough that they need, or making that decision that they need to make, or taking the action that they need to take. Accountability, of course, is a structured strategy whereby an individual, we're creating emotional leverage for someone to feel compelled to do something because they made a commitment to themselves and to someone else. Visualization is another technique that we'll use to help them create a more vivid and compelling picture of that outcome that they're after, so that there's something attracting them and pulling them to it rather than just them beating themselves up to push towards it. And we have to keep that context of trust, and there is strategy around that as well, where we have to create a safe space, a non-judgmental space, in order for a person to feel vulnerable or to be vulnerable and be able to admit that they're not doing what they have committed to do without feeling like they're going to be shamed or be judged by me. That's the last thing I want. I need for them to be honest with me and with themselves, so that we can get to the source of what's blocking them and get through that. Other tools that some coaches are trained, I've certainly been trained in, are strategies that leverage neurolinguistic programming, NLP, that many are familiar with, or CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, or theory is the way I'd rather describe it. Mindfulness exercises. We leverage components of emotional intelligence and the like. So there is a good bit of psychology in it. I definitely wouldn't call myself a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but I have been dubbed the mind coach, if you will, by some clients, and that's a big part of the game, right? When we're not achieving what we need to achieve, there's a thinking game going on in the background that's keeping us from doing what we know we need to do and want to do. And so, having those tools in the toolbox help me to help clients to break through that and ultimately, develop a new strategy and or follow through on an existing strategy to get the results they need.
Okay. How important do you feel it is for your client to be totally engaged and quote-unquote bought into the identified desired state?
Well, I've alluded to it a couple times in our conversation so far, but commitment is the number one factor in achieving any vision or goal. The level of commitment that one has is a direct indicator of whether or not they're going to accomplish that objective or that goal, or create those results for themselves. And so a lot of conversation that we have on the front end of goal setting and deciding on what the vision is for the business is to really explore that level of commitment. What do they really want? And then coming in behind that what with the why. Why is that important? And it can't be just one level. A lot of people will say, well, I want to grow the business. Okay, well, why do you want to grow the business? Well, I want to make more money. Okay, well, that makes sense, and we assume that means a number of things. Well, they can buy bigger cars, nicer cars, bigger houses, things of that nature. But that's not really what I find motivates most people. It's much more intrinsic than that. I mean, those things are cool. Even buying a bigger house, that's cool, right? But that's not likely the main reason why they want to buy a bigger house, is just to have a bigger house. I recall one client when we explored this a little bit. He did want to buy a house. He wanted to buy a house at the beach. And he wanted to buy a big house. And we talked about that, and he was pretty excited about it, but, and he would talk about it, he could really see this vision of the house in his head really clearly. But I asked him, I said, is it really about having a bigger house, or is there more to it than that? He said, oh, no, there's definitely more to it than that. I went, tell me more. Well, before I knew it, he was describing this house in the context of what was going on in the house with his family, with his grandkids, being able to spend time with them and to, take walks up and down the beach, to go fishing with his grandsons. And I mean, the things that just came out there were just so, it gives me chills to think about it, because I'm like, that is the essence of the why right there. And if you can tap into that and see that picture of what you want with that type of clarity and vividness, the chances are likely that you're going to be able to achieve that goal. That's where the commitment comes from. It's not just from saying, I want to achieve a goal, and yes, I'm committed to it. It's really coming in behind it and explaining why you're so committed to it. And that's how you really know the level of commitment that you have.
You suggested earlier sensing a loss of energy when a particular topic was brought up, or perhaps a client's failure to meet deadlines. Are there other signs that you perhaps look for that would suggest to you that the client is not truly interested in attaining the desired state?
Yeah, sure. There are all kinds of indicators. Sometimes it's avoidance of the topic that we're on, maybe being scattered, right? Now, some people are just that way. Entrepreneurs can tend to be that way. So it's a discernment that only experience can tell whether or not they're avoiding something because they're not really committed to it, or if they're just kind of bouncing around. But generally speaking, that's one indication when they're moving to different topics and not staying focused on the one thing that they say they want. The other thing is avoiding the conversations with me, sometimes not making the calls, fearing accountability, for instance. A lot of us are, particularly achievers, are concerned about being accountable or being seen by other people as failures or not following through on what we say we're going to do. There's a sense of guilt that comes with that. And I try to create the safest space possible for my clients, because that's the last thing I want. Even if they're not following through on their commitments, I don't want them to feel judged or shamed by me. That's not my role. That's not who I am, and that's not my right. My goal is simply to help them recognize what they're doing, because a lot of times they may not realize it. Why am I not coming to the calls? Why am I not staying focused on the topic? Why am I not following through on my commitments? Well, if we can explore that question without judgment, then we can realize whether or not there's something else there that's blocking them from, like we talked about earlier. Maybe it's fear of failure, or any number of things, fear of success, fear of inadequacy, fear or lack of resources. Usually it is some element of fear. But that's usually a good indication when they're skipping around topics, when they're avoiding the conversations with me, when they're not following through on the things that they say they're going to do. Those are all good indicators that that the commitment is not what it needs to be in order to really achieve the goal.
By clinical definition, as a coach consultancy person, you basically are there to help bring forth ideas and solutions, be a sounding board of sorts. You're not necessarily in a role to be the implementator. Because when you become the person that implements, then you have a responsibility to be accountable for the execution, success, or failure. Have you had clients in the past that have tried to pull you over into that role? And if so, how do you ensure that your relationship with the client is kept at the arm's length so that you remain the coach consultant and keep yourself in your defined role?
That's an excellent question, Lori. It is a bit of a tightrope, but it really comes down to establishing clear expectations on the front end of the relationship and managing those boundaries that you establish through those expectations. I'm pretty clear up front when I'm working with somebody that it's not my role to actually do the work that we outline, right? We're we're going to together, collaboratively, and through coaching and me offering suggestions and ideas from the consultancy standpoint, we're going to come up with what that vision is for your business. We're going to unpack the why behind it to really make sure that we have the level of commitment that fuels the engine to get through it, to get through the obstacles and achieve that goal. We're going to come up with a game plan to be able to do it. We're going to unpack that game plan so that we're covering every critical aspect of your business, from wowing the clients that you have to making sure that you're focused on the right clients, to attracting the right clients, to working with your team, hiring the right players, making sure they're in the right seats on the bus, and any number of things. And of course, from the consultancy standpoint, a lot of my clients want me to bring forth suggestions as well as tools and resources. So I have, good gosh, a repertoire of tools, everything from, staff evaluation documents that I've collected over the years, some of the best out there, matrices for defining client services and deliverables in order to wow the clients, tools to help them segment their clients and develop reports and augment their own systems, and the list goes on. So naturally, when I pull those tools out, there's an inclination for some clients to say, hey, do you mind helping me with this? And I have to really be discerning around that. And I can't tell you that there's a black and white answer to that, because some of it depends on the relationship with the client. Some of it depends on the nature of the personality of the person I'm working with. And some of it has to do with my personal bandwidth and my own boundaries, how much I can take on. And, of course, fees do fall into that as well. How much am I being compensated for it? And I have to kind of manage and balance all that out. But as a rule of thumb, I don't actually get into the tactical side of deliverables. I will rarely put together a client service matrix, for instance. Now, what I will do is, if a client really doesn't understand how to leverage a tool, I'll talk them through filling it out in one of our calls, for instance, and I'll literally type in that information that they've shared with me, just so that they can be, free of the administrative side of that for a few minutes and just be completely free to think about the content that goes into the document. Then when I create that for them or give them a sample of it, I pass it off and say, now you've got an example of it. Now you need to leverage your own resources, either your time or find somebody on your team that can do that for you. But here's the real key to kind of wrap this answer up for you, Lori. My job is not to create dependency. I don't want a client dependent on me. My role is to empower them to build their business independent of me. At the point where my client becomes dependent on me, I maybe crossed a boundary for that is not necessarily beneficial to them. Now, it's different than them choosing to continue to work with me because they value what I do for them and they want to continue to leverage that, than to say, I really need Todd. He's done this spreadsheet for me and I don't know how to do it myself. That's not a situation that I want to be responsible for.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. I want to move along to probably one of the most uncomfortable points that you have to face. And I'm sure if you've done this work for any amount of time, you've had to face this. Under what circumstances do you determine that a relationship with a client needs to be terminated? And if you do determine that, how do you handle delivering that message?
That has only happened literally a couple times in my over a decade of coaching, quite frankly, where I felt compelled to, I guess terminate would be the right word, but it was a softer approach than a literal termination. It was really having a heart-to-heart conversation with my client, raising up the awareness that we both needed to confront to realize that for whatever reason, the relationship didn't necessarily need to continue. It wasn't serving either one of us.
Okay.
If a client isn't receiving value from the coaching relationship. And typically that value is measured in results, right? But not always, not always tangible results. I can give you a sidebar example of that in a second, but let's stay with the tangible results because that's where most of my clients want to focus. I want to increase sales. I want more assets under management. I want to make sure that I've got the right team in place to get my business into that next level, whatever those goals are. Those are measurable results we want to manage to. Now, at the point where I feel like a client, we talked about commitment, we talked about signs or indications that a client isn't necessarily fully committed and prepared to move forward. When I see those signs come up and we acknowledge those together and we raise awareness and the client ultimately says, quite frankly, you're right, I'm not committed to it, and moreover, I think I'm perfectly happy where I am and nothing really needs to change. When that level of awareness becomes clear, I think that's a pretty good sign and indication that our season in the formal coaching relationship is run its course.
Okay.
Right? And that's a pretty easy one to acknowledge together, as long as the individual doesn't feel judged by me. And I'm intentional with that because for each his own, right? It's not my job to tell a person that, hey, because you're satisfied being where you are today is not satisfactory. That's not my role. It's perfectly satisfactory as long as they are making a conscious decision and are fully aware that that's what they're saying and that's what they really want. So at that point, I think it is appropriate to terminate the relationship, and it could be a good thing. Maybe together we've already gotten to that next level, and that's the level that they're perfectly happy with for now. And for now, they're good to go. And so the relationship probably does need to be terminated, I guess, or at least maybe put on pause for some period of time until they realize that they want something more. But that's usually the biggest reason, is the coaching is whatever they wanted to achieve has been accomplished, or they've decided that what they wanted to achieve is not really what they wanted to achieve, and they're perfectly happy where they are. Either one of those situations warrants a serious conversation about ending the relationship for that time. The only other reason would be ethical reasons. I had one client that was doing some stuff that was terribly unethical. I lay those boundaries out up front in the relationship, and I did so in this case. But the individual was doing some things that were clearly unethical, frankly illegal, and I just felt like I needed to acknowledge that for what it was, and to say that I just couldn't feel comfortable moving forward, empowering them to continue that type of work and behavior. So that was a more serious example of the need to terminate.
Perfect. Well, I know that our time is running short, but I do want to end with one more question if you do have the time.
Sure.
What credentials do you possess, and do you find it necessary to market yourself with the credentials with a new prospect?
Yeah, that's a great question too, Laura. You've really given me some wonderful questions today. That one's good because it's in the coaching consultancy industry. It's a conversation that comes up quite frequently. In the past, and I would say even today, formal credentials like certifications have not carried a lot of weight because, quite frankly, particularly on the coaching side and frankly also on the consultancy side, one, because I don't think there's a lot of awareness on the part of our target audience out there about credentials in this space. There are a few governing bodies out there like the International Coach Federation that kind of monitors the type of accredited certifications out there. But quite frankly, again, certifications are only important to the degree that you're aware of their importance. And unfortunately, there's not a tremendous amount of awareness out there. Now, I say unfortunately because there are a lot. It makes it really, the barriers to entry are really low for people to get into the coaching consultancy space. They can hang that sign up and go into business tomorrow without any credentials whatsoever. And that's unfortunate because there are a lot of actual people out there that are professing to be coaches and consultants that are offering training programs, and more or less all they are is trainers, but they're calling themselves coaches or truly consultants. And that really dilutes the value of what a truly certified coach or consultant provides. And so therefore, I believe that those credentials are important. That's why I have several of them. I have a certified I'm a certified professional coach through an accredited ICF program from International Coach Academy. I'm also a certified group coach. I'm a certified behavioral specialist, and I'm a certified firewalking instructor. That one catches a lot of attention, of course, but metaphorically, firewalking is much like us trying to accomplish goals. We have to stay focused on the outcome, and between where we are today and that outcome lie a lot of hot coals, a lot of challenges that confront us and tend to distract us. So to be able to look at our goals that way and realize that we have to stay focused on the goal or we'll get burnt is an important metaphor. And so, those certifications are really important to be able to apply them to real life and to help individuals create breakthrough. So it's not just the certification for the sake of certification. It's really the fact that the certifications give someone that's certified a lot more tools in their toolbox to be able to help an individual create the results that they want for themselves. That's the main reason why they're important. Secondly, it's important because it does help you to market yourself and distinguish yourself from others that are out there. And therefore, to kind of finish your question here, I do proactively put my credentials out there because I think it's important to educate people on why those credentials are important, the difference that they can make in the results that the client gets, and to, again, make the decision easier for them because there are a ton of coaches and consultants out there to choose from. And, I think it's important to try to make that decision a little easier for people, and credentials can be one of many ways to do that.
Thank you, Todd.
You're welcome.
To wrap up, again, I really want to thank you for your valued time, for sharing your experience with us today. It's been extremely insightful and will be helpful to so many who are eager to pursue what sounds like a very fulfilling career. If I hadn't already gone as far as I have down the path I'm in, I might be interested in it. But I did want to give you the opportunity as we close to just see if you have any closing thoughts or anything you might want to share with any audience that might listen to this.
Yeah, one, I want to thank you for choosing me. I'm honored that you would invite me to be your interviewee in this important subject matter. It's something that I'm obviously passionate about. I'm sure that played into your decision to ask me to be a part of this, but I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for such well thought out questions. And I guess I would just say, for anybody that happens to be listening to this interview, if you're in a leadership role or you're in the role of running a business of any sort, I would highly encourage you to not think about being or continuing to be a single warrior out there. I know from running several businesses of my own, it can be a lonely place and a hard place, and it doesn't have to be hard, and you can beat your head up against a brick wall forever and not get the breakthrough that you need. And it's particularly for a lot of us single warrior mentality people, it almost feels like we're failures when we can't see ourselves doing it alone. I can't tell you how many clients that I've had that in conversation would say, I hate the fact that I need your help to do this. I, quote, should be able to do this on my own, right? And you know what? That's such a harsh place to be, and it's such a confined place to be because And I'm guilty. I was the same way early in my career, particularly in running my own businesses. I thought I need to do this on my own, by myself. I need to, figure this out myself. And when I realized that there's a plethora of resources out there, and mainly in relationships. And when you leverage relationships, you can really create fast breakthroughs. And that's what it's really about. It's not about trying to show people that you can do something completely on your own. It's really about trying to sort out what you really want, create that vision for yourself, and achieve that. And however you need to do it, do it. That's the goal, is to get it done, not to have to say, I did it all by myself, because that's not a real admirable place to be. And quite frankly, it can be a lot more fulfilling doing it with other people. And so I would encourage all those that may resonate with this to reach out and find a mentor, find friends, find colleagues, peers that they can work with, and certainly reach out and talk to some coaches and entertain and consider investing in that relationship. Because I can tell you, the clients that I've worked with get results in a fraction of the time than they otherwise would on their own. And that's comparing past experience with the experience in working with me. Right? How fast did they get to where they are today? It could have taken them 10, 20 years. And in fact, in working together for maybe a year or 2 years, they've made that kind of progress that they did over that 10 years plus some, and that's what it's all about. It's acceleration. It's creating that outcome for themselves quicker. And it's a lot easier to do it with help than it is to do it alone.
Well, again, I want to thank you, and we'll conclude. I'll end by saying to anyone that's listening, I personally would highly recommend Todd. He provided a lot of valuable insight and helped me tremendously during my time working with him. And I want to thank him for being willing to share so many intimate thoughts for the benefit of not only higher education, but for those of you that may be contemplating whether or not working with a consultant or coach is right for you and your business. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Have a great day.
You too.